Right now, the biological machine inside your skull is turning the glow of this screen and the sound of my voice into a single, unified experience. You are not merely processing light and sound. You are experiencing them. Your brain consumes roughly 1/5 of your resting energy to sustain the activity behind this moment. Experience can also produce measurable changes in its structure. Neuroscience can measure parts of this activity, estimate its energy cost, and observe how the system changes over time. What it cannot yet explain is why any of this processing is accompanied by subjective experience. Why there is something it feels like to be you. To understand where scientific explanation reaches its limit, we first have to understand what neuroscience has already discovered. For decades, textbooks repeated a clean number, 100 billion neurons. When researchers finally tested that figure by homogenizing fixed brain tissue and counting sampled nuclei, they produced a new, famous estimate, roughly 86 billion. But that number is influential, not exact. It came from only 4 adult male brains, and a recent statistical reassessment concluded that the true population average remains substantially uncertain. Synapse estimates are even less secure. One study of 5 young adult male brains estimated roughly 164 trillion synapses in the neocortex alone. At 1 per second, counting them would take more than 5 million years. These measurements describe scale. They tell us part of what the brain is made of. But knowing the number of parts does not explain why any state of the system is experienced. Although the brain represents only about 2% of adult body mass, it accounts for roughly 20% of resting energy expenditure. Even during quiet wakefulness, it maintains a high metabolic baseline. Many demanding tasks redistribute activity across networks while changing the brain's overall energy demand only modestly. In 2001, Marcus Raichle and colleagues described a consistent pattern. Several brain regions showed lower activity during externally focused tasks than during a resting baseline. Later work linked different components of this system, now called the default mode network, to internally directed processes, including autobiographical memory, self-referential thought, and imagining possible futures. The brain does not go quiet when it appears to rest. It changes how its activity is organized. These measurements describe dynamics and metabolic cost. They show how brain activity is sustained and redistributed. They still do not explain why activity is experienced. The adult brain is not structurally fixed. In 2004, researchers scanned adults who were learning to juggle. After 3 months of practice, structural MRI showed temporary regional differences in gray matter signal in areas associated with visual motion processing. After the participants stopped practicing, those measured differences partially decreased. The scans did not reveal the microscopic mechanism behind the change, but they showed something important. The brain processing this moment carries part of its own biological history. Learning can alter the system. Adaptation can reshape it. But describing how a physical system changes is still different from explaining why being that system feels like anything at all. Descriptions of scale, energy, and adaptation do not by themselves connect neural processes to subjective experience. In 2025, researchers placed 2 influential theories of consciousness into a pre-registered, head-to-head test. Global Neuronal Workspace Theory treats consciousness like a broadcast. Information becomes conscious when it becomes widely available across the brain, like a signal reaching the main stage of a theater. Integrated information theory starts somewhere else. It does not look for a stage. It asks how deeply the system is woven together, how its parts form an integrated whole that cannot be separated without changing the system itself. Researchers designed an adversarial collaboration, agreed predictions, one theory, neutral consortium, and both frameworks tested side by side. They used fMRI, MEG, and intracranial recordings obtained from patients who were already undergoing clinical monitoring. Some predictions were supported. Important claims from both theories were challenged. The data produced no clear winner. But the most revealing result was not which theory survived. It was what the experiment was never designed to answer. The study tested what changes in the brain when a stimulus reaches awareness. It did not test why neural processing is accompanied by subjective experience in the first place. That distinction matters. We can identify neural patterns that track conscious perception. But finding a physical correlate is not the same as finding an explanation. Tracing the neural signature of an experience does not explain why there is an experience to trace. That deeper gap is what philosopher David Chalmers called the hard problem of consciousness. And researchers still disagree not only about the answer, but about how the problem should be formulated, and what would count as resolving it. We can estimate the cells. We can map the energy. We can observe experience, associated changes in structure. And we can force competing theories to make predictions against the same data. Every one of these measurements explains something real. But what we still lack is an agreed explanation connecting those physical processes to subjective experience. The system that makes conscious investigation possible is also the system under investigation. That is not a failure of science. It is one of the boundaries our current explanations have reached. So far,